Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the In Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. We're a brick and mortar retail record store, and today I'm going to go over with you the best sounding pressings from 1977's Alan Parsons Project, I, Robot. I'm going to kind of do this a little bit different than I've done some of my past videos. I'm going to kind of order these up in starting with the records that I feel are kind of the most inferior, leading up to the best sounding at the end. My least favorite copy of this record is actually the US first pressing. Got the sign when they were here in town last year. Doesn't unfortunately add to the sound quality because it still sounds pretty much like shit. Very muddy. The bass is kind of bloated. The vocals are real muffled. Not a copy that I would really listen to if I had a choice. This is a German first pressing. This is kind of real similar to the US first pressing. The bass is kind of weak, kind of the top end's real flat, kind of, again, muddy sounding. Not my go-to copy. This is a Japanese first pressing. This has a much better sound, much more clarity, but like all Japanese pressings, you know, there's just too much boost on the top end. Bass is tight, but not as much, it's kind of dialed back a little bit compared to some of the other pressings. So you kind of got a weird EQ. You've got a little bit boosted top end. You don't quite have as much bass as probably this album should have or was intended to have. Very clean, quiet vinyl. I'm not a fan of Japanese pressings. They all kind of suffer from the same issues as far as mastering. The Japanese were notorious for boosting the top end and cutting the lower end, so they really have a weird EQ. This is actually the second Japanese pressing. Came out in '79. Actually, I think this particular pressing has quieter vinyl. The sound is almost identical. A little bit better bass definition on this particular copy. So as far as the bass goes and the clearer vinyl, I kind of rank this a little higher than the first pressing. This is the first Mobile Fidelity issue that came out in 1982. Similar in the way they made the Japanese sound, they kind of did it to this. Except you've got a really powerful bottom, you got a really powerful top end, a lot of sizzle, a lot of shimmer. But like a lot of Mobile Fidelity records from the 80s, they kind of gutted the middle, and you really don't have the mid-range, you don't have the warmth from that mid-range with this particular record. Dead quiet vinyl, made on JVC Super Vinyl. Mobile Fidelities were notorious for clean, quiet, very crisp sounding, but the EQ on this is the problem with this particular pressing. Now, this particular pressing came out a year later, 1983, I believe. This is the Mobile Fidelity ultra high quality pressing version of this. They dialed back the top end a lot, but it's really still missing that mid-range. They were kind of dealing with crappy record players in the early 80s, and they were kind of making mastering decisions for those cheaper turntables. So they kind of made these records to sound good on a modest and average turntable. Well, nowadays you're going to get a lot higher quality turntable at a lower price. So a more modern pressing of a audiophile type of record is going to have a much more transparent to the tape kind of sound. They're gonna leave what's on the master tape more. They're not gonna cut it off. They're not gonna dial it back. They're gonna give you a much better representation of what the master tape sounds like. In the 80s, they didn't do that. They kind of made a record based on your particular turntable, and in the 80s, they weren't that great. They wanted the average consumer to kind of have a good sounding record. Again, a weird mastering choice makes this not my favorite copy. Now this is actually my favorite copy of all the original pressings. This is a UK first pressing. This really has a killer sound. It's quite amazing, the sound quality of this compared to a German or US pressing. I mean, they sound like shit compared to this record. This has really crisp vocals. You know, it's EQ'd perfectly. The bass is right on. The treble's right where it needs to be. If this was the only record I had of this, I would be happy. It's a really good sounding pressing, not really crazy expensive to find. The quiet's vinyl. The vinyl is pretty quiet. It's a really good sounding pressing. You can't really go wrong with this. Now this is the classic pressing that came out in the early 2000s, done by Bernie Grundman, mastered by Bernie Grundman, done on 200 gram vinyl. This is the best sounding version of this record you're going to get on a single disc. It's really killer. It's all of the things that the UK pressing is, but you're going to get a much better sound stage. You're going to get much better instrument separation on this. It really is a killer sounding record. A lot more dynamic range too than I think the first pressing, the UK first pressing had. Really clean, wonderful sounding record, but it's quite a bit more money. You know, it seems like these are kind of fetching today around $100, where, you know, you can get a UK copy maybe for 10, 15 bucks. But if you really want the best sounding version of this on a single disc, this is it. And this is the best sounding version of this album, period. This is the current in-press version of this album by Mobile Fidelity. Now this is a double disc 45 RPM record. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. You're going to be switching the record twice as much. But if you want it to sound the best it possibly can, this is it. The big benefit from the 45 RPM is the dynamic range. And that's what you're going to get on this that you're not going to get on the other records. The dynamic range on this is fantastic. The instrument separation, just as good, if not better than the classic reissue. Very organic sounding, perfectly EQ'd. Again, probably very transparent to what was on the original master tape. This is the record to own. I know a lot of people don't like 45 RPM records. You know, it's inconvenient enough in the CD era to be switching records over, you know, as it is, as opposed to playing a CD and listening to it in one shot, or a high resolution file, listening to it in one shot. But if you really want to hear this album sound the best it possibly can, this is the one. And it's in print, so it's quite a bit lower than a lot of the better sounding pressings, the UHQR Mobile Fidelity, the Classic Records pressing. You're going to get this for the in the $50 range. Mobile Fidelities, double disc, 45 RPM is the way to go on this. All right, guys, that's it for today, and until next time. Now remember, if you have any more videos, recommendations that you'd like to see me cover, leave some message for me in the comments, and I'll be happy to go ahead and tackle that in the near future. Have a good day.